Good morning and welcome to the Week in Politics. I'm Ed O'Daly, the Vice-Chancellor is unavailable today, so he's asked me to stand in. I look after the Communications Office here at the University. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you.
And welcome to Stone Week. This is the University of Canberra's 45th birthday. I'd like to start by talking about the Commission of Audit. Before we talk about the membership, I'd just like to sort of have a chat about the scope of it. It seems like quite a wide-ranging and unpredictable scope that it has. Is the government going to cause more problems for itself than it solves with this?
Well, it certainly is an inquiry into virtually everything. It'll cover all aspects of federal government. It will look at the overlap between federal and state responsibilities, and it's on a very tight timetable with a report in January, another report in March. I think it's a useful exercise. The last one was 1996, and it is always good to get a look into what government's doing and whether it's all worthwhile and whether it can be done more effectively. Having said that, and coming to your central question, these things are difficult for the politicians when they receive the report. For example, in 1996, a lot of recommendations from that Commission of Audit weren't taken up because they were simply politically too difficult, and that was in the context of the new Howard government making some tough decisions in its first budgets. So I do think that it's easy to start these things, harder then to deal with what comes out of them, and it'll be a big test for this government because of course Tony Abbott is locked into promises of not cutting certain areas, and you'd imagine that some of those would be targeted by the Commission, so it'll be juggling within areas and there'll be political pain associated with it.
You talk about the politics of it. Tony Shepherd is a widely respected business person, but he's also the president of the BCA. Now, as the chair of the audit, are they, and as someone who's called for such an audit before the election, is this politicising the process more than might usually happen?
Obviously these exercises are political by their nature to a fair degree, but I do think it raises questions when you have the chief of a lobby group as the chairman, not whether he's on it, because as you say, he is well respected and he's a man with a plan. The BCA put out a very detailed plan before the election about what should be done, and there was a lot of overlap between this and the terms of reference for this commission. But the chairman does drive the whole exercise. Last time in 1996, the chairman was Bob Officer, who was a Melbourne University academic. So there was an attempt to get someone who wasn't from one of the lobby groups, and I do think it raises a few questions, especially as the Secretariat of the Audit Commission is going to be headed by the Chief Economist of the BCA, Peter Crone. Again, someone who's well respected, well qualified, used to work for John Howard, used to work in Treasury, but he is now working for the BCA.
Also this week, Bob Carr announced he was stepping down from the Senate. Now, he's previously said he was quite enthusiastic about serving a full term, but he's announced he's going. He's had some words of advice for his colleagues. From Bill Shorten's perspective, will he be relieved by this or will he be troubled by it?
I don't think either particularly. It was no surprise. No one thought that Bob Carr was going to stay in the Senate once Labor was defeated. It is a bit questionable when you run and get a 6-year term and the next thing you say, oh well, things have changed, and that was just a bit of exuberance when I said I'd stay on in the Senate. Of course I'm going. I think that this reinforces public cynicism. But from the Labor Party's point of view, Bob Carr's obviously a persuasive political voice. He's a good politician, and so he's an asset in any team. But on the other hand, I don't think he will be greatly missed because Labor is moving on to another generation, and he was obviously not going to be part of Labor's future for any length of time. Even if Labor had won, he said he'd stay for 3 years, or would have stayed for 3 years.
And on the Labor Party's future, Michelle, the front bench was announced this week with some comings and goings. Are the outcomes a sign that the factions are alive and kicking and that influence might be prevailing over talent?
I think the one message coming out from Labor since the election has been that for all the talk of more democracy in the party, and even from all the election of the Labor leader by a much broader group, by the party as well as the caucus this time, factions are alive and well and having a big say. And there's no doubt that in the choice of the front bench, although this system's now gone back to caucus election, we had factional tickets, we had no one running even who hadn't been ticked off beforehand. And so there is a strong factional influence, I think too strong. You're never going to get rid of factions, and they do have a positive side in the management of a party, but they also have a negative side, and I think that Labor has too much factionalism. Just one example of that coming through, Don Farrell, the South Australian right-wing power broker, has been defeated for the Senate. He is not going to be on the present situation in the Senate after mid next year, and yet he's run for the front bench and he has a spot on the front bench, and that's because he is factionally important and has factional clout. The next thing I think we'll see is that someone is strong-armed out of the Senate to allow Don Farrell to continue his career.
All right, well, thank you very much, Michelle.
Thank you.
That was The Week in Politics. We hope you'll join us again next week. Thank you.